Hello, my name is Ricky Walter.
Well, hello, welcome to the Ricky Walter Show, and I am Ricky Walter, your host. I hope you can hear me out there. I'm doing this on a new gadget so that we can, I'm learning. But if you would, stop a minute real quick and like and share this post with your social media or your Facebook family and on your feed. And if you would, call somebody. Tonight we're going to be talking about grief. We're going to talk about how that impacts our lives. And so if you would, do that for me. Invite somebody to come on who you know is dealing with grief. Those of you who are watching for the very first time, let me take a minute and introduce myself to you. I am a licensed professional counselor. I am a nationally board certified counselor. I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and I'm certified in a theoretical orientation called LPHA, or Licensed Professional Healer of Arts. That is a fancy word for simply sets forth that I work with people in recovery, helping them to gain some sense of and maintaining some sense of normalcy in their lives through planning and treatment and all of that. So glad that you decided to join me. Let me just tell you, I've been practicing. I just noticed that looking back, I've been practicing since a little shortly after I graduated with my first master's in counseling in 2004. So I've been going at this a while now. I feel like time has gone by very, very fast. And I primarily work with children, adolescents, families, and adults who are dealing with different disorders such as depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorders, children who are dealing with ADHD, and a number of other things. And so that's what I do every day. And this forum is for you. I hope this forum will be a help to you so you can gain information and provide support and get your questions answered and build a community of concerned individuals to help those who are struggling with mental health issues gain help, hope, and healing. And so if you want to share questions on this format, you can. Just mention to you that anything you share on this format is not confidential. However, you can, if you have a confidential question or something you would like to ask me confidentially, you can surely go on to my email address that I have designated strictly for your confidential email and communication with me, and that's Ricky Walter 95 at gmail.com. That's Ricky Walter 95 at gmail.com. Or you can text me if you have a confidential information you want me to know, and that's going to be at 903-875-8039. That's 903-875-8039. Now, if you want to be live for an interview, we're going to have one today because we're going to be dealing with grief. And so, as I said, get on the phone and tell somebody we're going to be dealing with grief. The actual question that was posed to me is, can we discuss the 5 stages of grief? And so we're going to set some groundwork for that. So I want to encourage you to help me do that. Listen, before we go any further, let me encourage you to go online and purchase your tickets for our event on February the 16th. Love is in the air, an evening of fine dining and music. Our guest for that night will be Bobby Sparks and some other fine musicians and a wonderful artists who will be with him that night. We have 2 shows, 5 and 9. You get a wonderful meal. You can pick from 2 different entrees, and you'll have vegetables, dessert, salad, and rolls, beverage. It'll be a wonderful evening to just get out and enjoy yourself. Get out and enjoy your evening and just let your hair down and just enjoy a time of fun. Again, we are going to be addressing some really good issues. This is Black History Month, and so we're going to be talking about all through this month issues that are relevant to Black history or the Black culture, African American culture. But tonight, to build our foundation, we're going to be talking about, like I said, loss and grief. I want you to get this book. This is our book of the month. This book is called Shook One. And so you need to get this book. Charlemagne the God. If you don't want to get it on Amazon, you can get it in an audio book. You can also, I was in Walmart today and there was 5 books on the shelf. So you can go to Walmart and get this book if you don't have it. Because this is our book for the month and we want you to get this book. Our documentary of the month is called 13th. And we're going to be these 2 documents, these 2 very, very good art of creative work will be guiding our conversations over the next month. So please do that and get that book. I believe you will be very, very well rewarded in your response to that book if you get it and read it. Now, let me just preference this. Please be respectful for people who log on and make comments or ask questions. Let's be concerned with their needs and not pose any hardship on anyone. And I will try to do my best to answer all the questions that come across the screen. If not tonight, I will surely be addressing them in other formats. But if you want to get something specifically from me, you need to send it to my email and I will try to get back information like that. I think somebody's trying to call me and I'm learning to do this on my cell phone. And so, can you all hear me? Can everybody hear me? Can anybody respond and say, yes, we can or no, we can? I wanted to, before I invite on Miss Nolan, who will be my guest tonight, she's going to share with us her personal story of loss and grief. And I think you're going to really be significantly. Thank you for Mr. Porter for sharing that with it, that you're able to hear this. On page 11, I will read a part of chapter 2 because we're on chapter 2 now in this book. And so I encourage you to get this book so you can follow along with us. And I'm going to read just a segment of it and I'm going to back out of it so that we can get in tonight into our discussion. This is in page 11 on chapter 2. Even though I hadn't admitted it to my doctor, the truth is I have spent much of my life dealing with anxiety. The first situation I remember getting really worried about was Hurricane Hugo. When I was 11, we found out that Hugo was going to touch down near our part of South Carolina. You might not remember it, but Hugo was a serious hurricane. I'm talking Category 4 with 140 miles an hour winds and 20-foot high storm surges. We were living in a trailer at the time and there was no riding it out. Like most of the people on our dirt road, we went to the local school, Whitesville Elementary, and huddled in the cafeteria. My father didn't try to convince the kids that we were going to do a cool sleepover. He kept it all the way real. He says we're facing a potential Category 5 hurricane that could kill all of us. Some of the adults tried to get the kids to play games or get distracted with activities, but there wasn't any fooling me. I was aware that as the wind grew louder, the old folks were low-key starting to freak out. I heard them say, we're all probably going to lose all of our trailers and our houses. They said there was a chance we might not even make it through the night. It shook me. I wasn't afraid of dying, mainly because I didn't really understand the concept yet. But I do remember the idea that we might not have a place to live once the storm was done being extremely scary. Chapter 2. You got to read this book. This is good read. I need you to read it. So as we get ready to get into our show for tonight, I want you to, again, log on. Tell somebody we're on live. They can get their questions answered. Okay, Miss Nolan, would you do me a huge favor? Would you simply type in the word hello? And then I'm going to log you on, and we're going to talk a minute about loss and grief. And that's going to set the premise for our discussion tonight. I don't know about many of you, but I've experienced loss for myself personally. Just in a few days will be the 16th anniversary of my mother's death, which that came to all of us as a shock. And I had spent years trying to find a place to bury that and not let it be shown in my expressions or my actions, and then realize that it wasn't what I needed to do. Miss Nolan, let's see if we can get you on. I see you tagging on now. Let's see. They're going to help me get you on here. Let's see. Hello, let's see. I got to figure out how to do it. But it took all of us by surprise, because no one was expecting for my mother to, and I had just left from Michigan, had been up there for several days, and had a chance to enjoy my mother and have fun and go out to dinner. And we were at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, eating at restaurants, hanging out, talking. And I really got a chance to really discuss a lot of the things that had happened in my past or my childhood that she could inform me with. And so it was really, really an opportunity for me to open up and learn some things. But let's see, Miss Nolan, I'm trying to figure this out. Let's see. I'm not for sure how to do it. But I'm going to call somebody to help me. So stay right there so that we can figure out how to get on this thing, and how to drag you in so that you can be a part, let's see, of this discussion tonight. Lamar, if you're hanging in and you're listening, kind of log on and help me get Miss Nolan on to this format. Here we go. Not block, not delete, not pin, comment. They're going to help me get this thing done. Let's see, maybe I'm supposed to add you here. Bring a friend, or is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Bring a friend. Miss Nolan, here we go. View your. Okay, we'll figure it out, Miss Nolan. Just hang in there. They're gonna help me figure this out. Let's see. But let me go on and continue to talk about what happened when we got the news that my mother had passed away. We were all in one place together, and there's just a shock. It just hit us like a ton of bricks, because no one was prepared for that. So as we get into this conversation about grief, and I don't want to open up any wounds that would be hard to heal, and so I encourage you, if you're dealing with a place in your life where you're dealing with grief, and you've lost a loved one, or you haven't, and you're still processing and struggling with that, I want you to reach out and talk to somebody. Don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer by yourself. We've all been touched by some semblance of death in some point in our lives, and people can be a big help and resource for you as you go through your own process. And so I want to encourage you to reach out to your friends, build yourself a social group, because this can be a hard place to be. And so if anybody got an iPhone and can tell me how to get Miss Nolan onto this thing, please let me know, because it surely would be a big help since I don't have no staff here. I'm trying to do this on my own, and so this is kind of a little thing I got to learn. While we're trying to get Miss Nolan on, to build this foundation of what we're going to talk about over tonight and tomorrow is talking about grief. And before we can really understand grief, we got to really understand the fact that we have that humans, that we are the people are we create strong affectionate bonds. That's what we're designed to do with people. We are social creatures, and understanding attachment is a way of providing you an understanding of how those emotional reactions occur when when the bonds of a person you're close to are either threatened or broken. And so if you have been dealing with some of the things that we're going to talk about, this is not to scare you, but this is to inform you that this stuff is what is expected of you or expected to be dealing with, and it's not any way abnormal. There are some things that you should that is expected when you lose somebody close to you, and oftentimes we don't know how to put a word to it. That's the biggest issue. In most cases, we don't know how to put a word to it or a connection to it. So I'm getting information and informing you so that you can be well informed about this. Um, I still haven't anybody. I still need somebody to kind of help me get Miss Nolan on to so that she can actually engage with us with um, her story. And so if you can remember how to do it, if you have an iPhone 8, I think it's iPhone 8 Plus, iPhone 8 something, I don't know what it is. It's just a phone to me. I don't use it for anything else but to call and to text and check my emails. And so I'm learning how to do it otherwise. Thank you so much. Replying to. Okay, so when we talk about grief, we first got to understand that we all have attached to people, and attachment is a normal action. Attachment comes from a need to have security and safety, and we develop this early in our lives. Usually, we direct attachment toward a few specific individuals, like our parents, our sisters and brothers, and our grandparents, and those attachments really tend to endure throughout the large part of our life cycle. And so forming attachments is something that would be considered normal behavior for children, and even adults. And as we are adults, we also form relationships. We get married, we go off to school, we meet new friends, and so attachments are what we would consider part of that. Um, and the greater the potential for the loss, the more intense and the more varied the reaction will be. In such circumstances, all of the most powerful forms of attachment, and we talk about forms of attachment, I'm talking about the things that are activated in you that signals something is gone or something has moved from its spot that provides you the security that you're so used to, the phone calls, the conversations, and all of that. So the activating antecedents would be things like clinging, crying, perhaps coercion or manipulation, because you want that person in your fears. And when that happens, right, and when those things are activated and it's remedied. Thank you. Let's see. I want to be on your video. There we go. All right. Here we go. Thank you, Miss Nolan. Now I can ask you. So, and so I will come back to this in a minute. But I am so glad to have Miss Nolan on. And so, as Miss Nolan is coming across on the screen, and she's got a very, very I think what she's going to share with us tonight is going to be very, very helpful for you, especially those who are dealing and in a place of grief. Good evening, Miss Nolan. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I got to tell you the story. Me and Miss Nolan ran each other at Walmart tonight, and there was no person there to actually wait on us at the counter. So we were kind of both in this frenzy thing. We both had things to do, and so it's kind of crazy. Miss Nolan, would you do me a favor? If you got a computer on as well, can you mute the computer? Leave your phone volume up and just mute the computer.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that'll alleviate the noise and the feedback. Okay. All right. So Miss Nolan was sharing with me at Walmart today her experience that happened some years ago and how it is fresh and new and it never really goes away. Ms. Nolan, won't you share with us your experience with the loss and grief, if you don't mind?
Thank you for letting me be a part of this evening's comments. My experience with grief happened. It started in 1992 after the loss of my daughter and my sister in a car wreck. And I was the only survivor in it. And so I'm told there's so many stages or different stages of grief. And I had to grieve for each of them separately. And that was really hard because I had physical injuries that prevented me from crying. I couldn't, the tears couldn't come. And so that, made me feel bad physically. It was a physical thing and an emotional thing and spiritual. I mean, they were all
Sure.
entangled.
Sure.
So it took me
Now,
about,
now you say you lost your daughter and your sister in this incident,
yeah,
and I'm sure not only did it affect you in your mental capacity, you said it affected you in your physical as well because you were injured.
right.
Take us through the process of what you can remember about how things began to unfold to a process of healing for you.
How it unfolded is positive.
How the process started and continued to help you to a place of healing or hope
Oh,
again or reestablish
okay.
some sense of hope in your life.
The first step started about 6 months after the accident because I had injuries to my lung and ribs, and it hurt physically to cry. So it was about 6 months before I could really just lie flat in my bed. I was sitting up most of the time, and it was such a burden physically. And I just started praying one day, just asking the Lord to just let me relax, let me, ease, get some kind of relief. And I finally was able to just gradually lay flat. And when I did, it was like the tears started, that was the first step. They started coming then. And it was just like a floodgate opened. And I think I probably cried 2 or 3 days before it just finally stopped,
Yeah, yeah.
completely. But that was the first step.
Mhm.
And
Now, in being an injury, you had to not just take care of yourself, but you also had to deal with the arrangements, the actually, letting go of your family members in the process of all of that. So, and had injuries and all of that. How was your support network around you?
my network was, I mean, it was awesome. I had my sister who it happened out of state. She came up to be with me, one of my oldest sisters. She took off a week from work when I got back home because we were in Missouri, and they had to fly, fly me back to Dallas, and so where I was living, and so she stayed with me for about a week, and that was the first part of the process
Yeah.
in helping me to be around somebody else. I had a
Yeah.
son that was about 10 years old at the time, and
Wow.
I still tried to do my motherly, duties with
Sure.
him. But after he would go off to school, I just stayed in bed.
Wow.
I didn't feel like I was depressed. I was just grieving, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know really how to feel.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I
Yeah.
hadn't really accepted it yet.
Yeah. Well, some of the things that you're talking about, and we're going to be talking about tonight, are normal things that people should expect as
Mhm.
as a normal process of grieving. However, we don't identify that, so we think those things are abnormal or not
Mhm.
supposed to be the case
Right.
when they are really what's supposed to be.
Right.
And the numbness is one thing I'm going to talk about tonight, and some of the other symptomatic things. Now, you said you had a 10-year-old son when this happened. Um, and I know that it was very hard to explain to him the permanency of his sister being gone and not coming back.
Right.
Did you ever have any? Uh, how did you stay connected to the memory of your daughter and your sister without it being an overwhelming experience where it was triggering you back to that place of numbness and all of that?
They were both very close to me, and they were both similar in how they reacted, in their spirituality. My
I'm sorry. I thought I put this thing on mute. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
My sister took off work to go on the trip with me, and when the accident happened, of course, I felt guilty because I asked her to go because my sister-in-law wasn't able to make it. So in the process of all of this, I was feeling guilt. If I hadn't asked her, she wouldn't have been there. And I felt guilt with my daughter because if I had sent her plane fare, maybe she could have flown home and we wouldn't have to drive. It was just a lot of things that were coming into my head, to make me feel guilty. And I held on to that a long time. I still kind of deal with it now.
Sure.
With the
Now,
what ifs.
in the Black community, there's a huge stigma associated with reaching out, going to get counseling, and reaching out to somebody that is trained to help, not fix the problem, but help mitigate the problem. Because oftentimes you were grieving two ways. You were grieving the loss of your children or your sister and your daughter, but you're also grieving the loss of normancy because you were injured. So there were things that you had to adjust to, other things that you had to keep going with. And with that stigma being so tight in the Black community, and it's very, very strong in the Black community, what would you say to people today who are experiencing what you did? Because obviously you didn't have a lot of, there was no professional access to help then. So what would you say to people today who are experiencing loss of loved ones and family?
Well, I would tell them that it's okay to get the help, the psychological help. I went through that process as well because my doctor, and then I was in a circle of Black doctors, and they all supported each other, and they recommended each other for different aspects of the health community.
Wow.
So my doctor referred me to a psychologist, in which I did probably about 2 or 3 months, went to meetings and support groups and everything with him.
Did that help you to process some of that?
The way it helped me is that, well, I was glad that there were other people that I could relate to. And at some point I had a physical heart event that happened, and so I was hospitalized. And while I was there, he asked the psychologist asked me if I wouldn't mind going into the psychiatric area of it so that we could have those, continue to have the meetings I was having outside, at his office. So I did that. And the thing that helped me with that was seeing that other people had problems or issues that were I think they were a lot worse than what I was going through. And it helped me to realize that, although what I'm going through is really bad, sometimes, other people are going through things, a lot worse. And so that helped me in a way too. And I didn't stay there at the hospital long because I just felt like I was the only sane person after hearing some of their stories, and I knew they were real to them too. And it just made me feel like, I think I can cope now.
Yeah.
And so I really kind of stepped away from that, and he released me, but from the hospital under that. But I still continued to see him, for a while, just to to keep up with it.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that because, I've been doing research and I'm finishing up my doctoral work, and in part of my research, I've been working in some of the the 7 historical Black denominations. Really, is where I was kind of focusing my research in, and how they accept and embrace the realness of the fact that we go through
Right.
things, and see grief is not a diagnosable disorder,
Right.
but there are other symptoms that you were dealing with, the depression, the anxiety issues, all those things were symptomatic of this, the thing that you had gone through.
Right.
Nothing as traumatic as when people lose someone in their lives. That is almost like going through a traumatic wounding or war experience.
Hmm.
You relive it over and over again. And
Right.
some of the time we deal with, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all these different things that even though they have a official name to them, and the person who's dealing with it is just real things. I can't sleep at night.
Right.
My body is responding to the things that I'm dealing with, and oftentimes the good thing about when you were talking about you were around people who were experiencing or had experienced some similar symptoms or things. That's the hardest thing that I can get people to understand is when you're isolated,
Right.
all of the thoughts that could come, it magnifies 100 times over.
Right.
And so those groups, the therapy, all that stuff was valued. I really appreciate you sharing that component with our audience, because as people are writing in and sending questions in, and tagging me on my email and texting information, I'm just trying to find a way to bring information to them where they can be whole and complete and can make informed decisions, informed decisions about their own mental health.
Right.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about the religious component to that, because you were saying that you did a lot of praying and all of that. What was the religious component? Did you ever think God was mad at you, or that he cheated you out of something special because he gave you a daughter and then he took her away from you? Or, did you ever feel like that? And how did you manage it if you did?
I I just felt like um I didn't feel like I was singled out, but a lot of people would tell me, well, you're blessed to be here. It could have
Mm-hmm.
been you. And
Mm-hmm.
I started feeling like, well, they were blessed too, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because, of the injuries and everything. God didn't want them to walk around or to be here,
Mm-hmm.
in those states, brain damage or broken
Mm-hmm.
bodies. And so I was feeling like they're blessed more
Uh-huh.
so than I am. I was feeling the guilt. I had my
Wow.
own personal guilt going on, and
Mm-hmm.
I was letting that consume me. I
Mm.
didn't want, I know how awesome God is, and I knew He could have healed me instantly or in due time. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ask for that healing. I asked for
Mm.
release earlier on, but I
Yeah.
didn't want to be healed because I wanted that guilt.
Mm.
I wanted to feel what they felt.
Mm.
That was how I was dealing with it. And it was
Mm.
like anytime I could, if I saw an accident on the highway,
Mm.
it made me feel like I felt that that moment of pain when the
Mm.
accident happened. Every time,
Mm.
even today when I see an accident,
Mm.
I feel that instant, just for that
Mm.
moment, like this is the
Mm.
pain that they felt. And I've
Mm.
I've had a hard time dealing with that, asking God to remove that from me, because I'm
Mhm.
still and it's been over 20 years that
Yeah.
happened, and I still have a time, dealing with that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, and I
Right.
know the spiritual aspect. I know
Mhm.
He will answer my
Mhm.
prayers if I
Yeah. And,
were to do.
and the thing about it, Miss Nolan, and I'll just share this with you.
Mhm.
Uh, Things that happen to that magnitude we never really lose it out. The memory never is erased. That is what makes us unique individuals. And so what I encourage people to do, and I encourage you to do that too, is realize that your normacy is going to be always this thing of regression moving forward, because that's the human aspect of us.
Right.
And if you didn't feel those way, if you didn't feel guilty, if you didn't feel like, and then I would be saying, well, where's the emotion? Where's the feeling?
Right.
So understanding those perspectives, and that's normal, and that is what make you what you do. And forums like this is
Mhm.
the best coping mechanism
It is.
that you can have, because sharing your story with people that are out in a forum like this, or in another place where you can speak out and tell them your experience, helps not just them, it helps you. And
Right.
so I encourage you to keep doing that. Don't stop doing that. Matter of fact, get out and share it everywhere you can, because there are grief support groups. There are
Mhm.
people who are going through that at the hospitals and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very devastating place to be.
Yeah.
And having someone who's already been there before,
Right.
faith don't have no maps to it. I tell people all the time, ain't no road maps to faith.
Right.
Faith is me going at it without a road map and just kind of trusting the instincts of the person who's guiding me. And that is a difficult place, because I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm going to end up.
Right.
But none of this stuff that happened caught God by surprise. And he always give us the coping capacity to deal with things in our time, in our process. But it's okay when you move forward and take 2 steps back, because that's the process.
Right.
That's the process, and long as you in the process,
Right.
long as you maintain recovery. I tell people all the time, deal with people with substance abuse, but everything we deal with has a recovery element to it.
Right.
And when I'm dealing with people with mental illness or depression, it has a recovery. And I tell them all the time, expect relapse, expect to backslide a little bit.
Hmm.
Backsliding kind of help us measure
Right.
how far we've really gotten in the process.
Right.
Say, well, I know what it's like to be there. I need to get back to where I was.
Right.
And so I really, really appreciate you for sharing this with our group tonight. And so the best thing about this is they can watch this all day long, 3-5 times a day, 7 days a week. And so I want to thank you, Miss Nolan. I just can't wait to get back with you in person. And you got a book coming out somewhere. I'm gonna know where it is. I'm about to help you get that book out, because that book is a powerful book. Because that story is very real.
Yeah.
It's very real, and I can sense the genuineness of it. And so I tell you, I'm still praying for you. I will continue to pray for you. But the process is a process, and God already knew how you were gonna make it through, and He put you around a whole lot of people. So thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you for
sharing that
having me.
story
And
with
I
us tonight.
appreciate I
Y'all,
appreciate
and y'all
you.
give her a big shout out. All right. Thank you so much.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Uh, thank y'all. I mean, that was powerful, wasn't it? Man, that is real. That was real tonight. I want to thank her for sharing that. And some of the things I'm going to talk about real quick has a lot to do just with that, what you just saw. Because when we're talking about attachments, we form attachments. And when we lose close people that we're attached to, there is an activating thing that we talk about, the clinging to, crying, and perhaps even manipulating things. And then when that person, or that a person is absent, is put back in that place, that kind of eases the state of stress and distress, alleviating, that grieving process. Now, but however, if that person is not put back, for instance, that person dies, or that person is removed forever, then you actually start entering to a place of where there's withdrawal and apathy, and despair ensues. And like all animals in the animal kingdom demonstrates this behavior in some kind of way. There's a research that was done back in 1963 where a researcher took what they call gray leg goose. Gray leg goose pair out, they pair up, and they pair up for life. And they fly around together. And what he did was he removed the male from that union, and removed it out. And the first response of the female to the disappearance of her partner is she became very anxious, attempting to find him. And the goose moved about restlessly day and night. She was flying great distances and visiting places where the partner might be found. Ultimately, all the time, she was symboling the long distance calls calling and beckoning for him to come. Now, the observable characteristics of the goose's behavior uh, is of missing that male is roughly how we identify with the human grief. The natural characteristics was also found in research with dolphins and elephants and ostriches. See, grief is an automatic response to a separation. And every separation, whether it's from, a job or, from, a divorce, you lose, some semblance of your house burned down, whatever. There is a semblance of a grief process. But for tonight, we're talking about grief as it relates to death. I got a question. The question came across to me the other day, or as a response to, I don't know if it was a response to this, but the person asked, is grief a disease? Well, that was a thought-provoking thing for me because I read an article that postulated losing a loved one is psychologically traumatic. The same as I mentioned to Ms. Nolan, it's like what you would go through if you went through a war. And you relive it over and over and over again. It doesn't go away. You don't lose a sense of that. So grief represents a departure from a state of health and well-being, and as just as healing for the physical body was important for Ms. Nolan to get back to some sense of homeostatic balance of where she could care for herself and do for herself. A period of time is likewise needed to return to a place of psychological equilibrium when that has been threatened by the loss of someone you love. Now, we use interchangeably terms, and I'm going to set some really facts to that and give you some explanation. See, we interchangeably use the word grief, mourning, and bereavement. Well, I'm gonna distinguish them for you. When we talk about grief, grief really indicates the experience of one who has lost someone to death. Okay, and it comprises of thoughts and feelings and behaviors and psychological changes that vary in the pattern and the intensity over time. And we've heard people say time heals all wounds. I've heard that said, but as you can see with Miss Nolan, this is something that lives with you for a lifetime. I mean, the intensity of it may dispensate or ease up, but you will never ever get rid of the notion that you lost someone. Um, and so when we say mourning, when somebody's mourning or in the process of mourning, it applies to the process of one going through the adaptation or the adapting to the death of a loved one. I'm having to adapt to it. I'm having to adapt to the finality of it and the consequences of that loss as I understand it. I'm going to lose that person, and my life have to assimilate. I have to simulate different place in my life without that person. And so that's what the mourning process is. It's having to go through the simulation process of adapting to that person not being there. When we talk about bereavement, and bereavement is something we use all the time, it really defines the loss to which a person is trying to adapt to the experience of having the loss. So when a person is bereaved, they're trying to adapt to the experience of having lost that person. Now, grief, as I said, is a normal thing, and most of the time we don't understand it, but it's a normal. And grief really refers to the uncomplicated process that is supposed to be expected. It encompasses the broad range of feelings and thoughts and physical sensations and behavior changes that are common. So let me give you some of those, and we're going to talk about the 5 stages of grief, not tonight. We're going to talk about it. I want to set this up first so you'll understand the 5 stages of grief when we get to it. Now, so what is to be expected when you're going through grief? Somatic and bodily stresses that we sometimes have. So your body goes into this place where you start having physiological notifications that something is wrong. You start having headaches, unable to sleep, blood pressure maybe, and some other things that's not normal for you. So that is a normal course of what happens when you lose somebody. Now, everybody won't present with the same thing or present with similar things, but they will present with something sometimes. And there is another thing that you can expect. That's preoccupation with the image of that person. I mean, you're looking at their picture all the time, you're remembering things. And so part of that process of grieving is being preoccupied. And people will tell you, oh, you focusing too much on that person. But that's to be expected. The conversations will go in that direction, even when you don't try for it to go in that direction. That's the direction in which it goes. You're remembering funny things. You're remembering happy things, sad things, stupid things, things when y'all did, you made a fool of each other. So that's a normal thing, okay? Another thing you can expect is expect for the relating of that person, the ceasing of that person's circumstances of the death to be replayed over and over again in your mind. I know that that's a hard thing to think about, but that's normal for you to think about that person who went through a long sickness, or if it was and as Miss Nolan said, every time she sees an accident, um, it reopens or it alerts her or her system that something happened in that place, or there was something that disturbed her homeostatic balance in that place. Our bodies, everything is trying to get back to balance. So anytime something is off balance, especially as grief, the body, all of your systems are fighting to get to some sense of balance, or what we could call equilibrium. When a person is equilibrium is off, they're dizzy. They don't have their wits about themselves, and grief has a tendency to do that. Another thing that is expected is hostile reactions. People moving stuff that belong to the person, or making comments, or being over sensitive, or other times over candid, or playing with the thought when you're in a place where you're not able to do that. Okay, because they don't understand your place. Another place is the inability to function as one had functioned before. Now, this is a very painful conversation. I understand that, and I want you to understand. I understand where you are, and I encourage you. You get to somebody who can help you and process the thoughts and feelings you're having. Okay, because feelings is one of those things. When we talk about feelings, we identify feeling as actual attributes. Sadness. What is sadness? That's a common thing that we all can identify with at times in our lives that we are sad. Feelings don't necessarily mean crying, or sadness don't necessarily mean crying. Crying is a signal that evokes a sympathetic or protective reaction from other people, and it establishes a really social situation in which the normal law of competitive behavior is surrendered and suspended. So in a time when when you're going through that feeling of emotion or that feeling of grieving and sadness, it's not a thing that the competition of attention and all that stuff leaves for a minute. It's suspended, and people really are moved by what you're feeling. Sadness can be experienced, like I said, with or without tears. But people who don't cry, people say, well, he is not crying. Don't mean that person is not sad. Or, so you have to think about that in terms of we can misread people's response. Anger is another thing that, as an emotion, anger is an emotion. And it's one of the most confusing feelings. And it's really the root of many of the problems that people have in the grieving process. Anger comes with there's two sources in which anger derives. And again, I'm here to provide you information so you can make informed decisions about your own mental health. One of the places is a sense of frustration. Sense of frustration is a very valid feeling. When I say frustrated, you're frustrated because there was really nothing you could change about it. There was nothing even if you tried, I'm frustrated because nothing responded to that, and then you can be frustrated because nothing is responding to how you're feeling right now. The other place it derives from is from regressive experiences that occurs oftentimes when we lose someone close to us. We may have be at that place of where we regress back and forth. Let me give you let me paint a picture of that for you real quick. So if you were a young child, imagine a young child in a shopping center trip or in a department store shopping with his mother, and everything is going normal like it's supposed to be, and suddenly the child looks up and mother is not there. The mother, walked off or disappeared for whatever. Immediately, the automatic response is panic and anxiety because the mother is not there. But however, when that mother returns, the response alleviates. It goes back to normal. However, the child started acting back up the way he was. So if he was having a temper tantrum or knocking stuff over, he goes back to that because the shock of mother not being there is removed because mother has returned. So so unlike grief, the loved one don't return. And so when you lose a loved one, that person don't return in the physical sense of that person being there. So that rather than giving you that sense of, oh, the mom is back, you now have to deal with, again, what I talked about earlier, is assimilating in your life with that person not being there. And that is a very difficult process, and I don't in any way discount what you are and what you're going through right now. The loss of any important person, there's going to be a tendency to move forward and regress, to feel helpless, to feel unable to exist without that person, to experience needs to be, to have an identity or appropriately targeted toward the deceased. You won't, and you still that person's sister or that person's brother or that person's mother. You will always be identified as that. And so the order of a healthy adaptation is not removing that person as if that person doesn't exist, but that person still has some assimilants in your life. One of the riskiest maladaptive behaviors that a person can develop as regards to anger is the posture of turning that anger inward against themselves. In a severe case, we call that retroflective anger. And where that person is constantly down on themselves, and no matter what you do, they can't seem to pull up. And that could develop and morph into severe depression and even suicidal behavior. And so, and if you're at that place, I encourage you, I'm telling you this, you can identify where you are. This is not to be some, I'm not no smart person and I'm trying to show my, knowledge. It's not what I'm here for. I'm here to bring information to you so that you can be helped. Now, blame is another part of that process. What blame simply is actually displacing anger at an appropriate place. So you direct it towards somebody else because or for the death of that person. You're making them responsible, and hence, if that person had done something different or it didn't do this or didn't do that, that the person who you lost would still be alive. And in that stage, people begin to blame the doctor. They blame the funeral director. They blame other family members and insensitive friends. And at major places, often they blame God. And as I mentioned with Miss Nolan, they can sometimes feel that, I've been cheated. God, I'm confused. Why would you give me a person and then take him from me? And God shows, why would God show me somebody precious or give me this person, let me birth this person in the world and take it from me? Is that fair? And that's how a person who's in that place see things. There are two types of blame I want to talk about, though. Blame toward the deceased person, because sometimes we can put that blame toward the person who died. Why did you die? You knew we had all these things going in our lives, and you left at the wrong time, and you left at the wrong season. We're in the midst of raising our children, or we're getting rich. And so there can be some blame toward that person, and that is need to be worked through as well. Or the blame can be directed toward oneself. And that person, feeling guilty, like Miss Nolan said that she felt really guilty that she lived and that the kids, that are daughter that were, and so those are processes that you will experience going through the grieving process. That's to be expected. Um, People who are going through that process may keep possessions that are and very close and don't get rid of those possessions for a long time because they represent an extension and a connection of that person that they were close to. And so rather than just holding on to the memories as a way of continuing that attachment, they hold on to objects and artifacts and things that have sentimental value. Sentimental value can't put a price on it. It's what it is, and it represents the life or the presence of a person. So people do go through that, and and if you're dealing with that, that's a normal process. Another thing is you will have guilt and self reproach. I mean, sometimes we blame and shame and which are common when you're going through a bereaved process. Um, um, Over not being kind enough. Maybe I wasn't kind enough. I didn't take the person to the hospital in time, and I did something to offend them, and I didn't apologize, and we had our last argument, and those things are a part of that process. Okay, and so normal guilt is manifested over something that happened or is happening, and something that was neglected around that time. And sometimes we may have to, think about that, and you may have to have some help working through that because guilt really is an irrational thought in many cases. We harbor guilt because sometimes our thinking is skewed or distorted by what that person thought or would have thought of us today. And to mitigate that in our field, we do what we call reality tests. I test that. I challenge those thoughts or irrational feelings by addressing it and challenging it with reality. Another thing is anxiety. Man, boy, I wish I could really spend a lot of time on anxiety because anxiety ranges from a light sense of insecurity to a strong sense of panic attacks and a more intense and persistent form. And when we deal with that, the more it is suggested that there are some abnormalities abnormalities that's developing a part of that grief process. If you're in that place, there are evidence-based treatment that shows strong efficacy in treating anxiety disorders. And anxiety disorders are just sense of. Now there are two primary sources of it. Let me tell you that there's two primary really sources of anxiety. One of them is attachment related. I think all of us have a sense of, oh my God, what would it be like if my mother was not here, if my child was gone, or we have that. I mean, that's just an attachment related anxiety. Um, and so people sometimes go through that. I mean, that's one of the primary sources that propel that fear. Remember, I told you yesterday, most of the time what happens is that behavior that we're exhibiting is reinforced by experiences, or a thought is reinforced by experiences or encounters that enforces that, whether positive or negative. And so when you have anxieties and stuff that's going on, oftentimes that is reinforced by things that trigger that, and you will hear things and people will say things. Loneliness is another thing that has a sense of or perpetuates or is a primary source of anxiety. Sometimes people feel like they are alone in a situation and have no other recourse. There's no hope. There is no and see. So there's two types of loneliness. There's an emotional loneliness and there is social loneliness. Now, social loneliness is can be helped by getting into a group that will provide social support. Maybe your church group, maybe some girlfriends and those kind of things. But it doesn't really mitigate against emotional loneliness due to the brokenness of an attachment. So what I encourage you to do is you need to actually find ways of dealing with your emotional loneliness in a healthy way. And that will come oftentimes in actually working with somebody. My goal, the reason why I opened the private practice I'm in today, and I know time is gone by, we got to get out of here now. But the reason why I opened the practice up was because I wanted to help people who did not have a way of accessing help. They don't have insurance, they don't have Medicaid, they fall between the cracks, but they need help. Let me quickly go through this. Fatigue is another part of that. Apathy, listlessness, person who is going through grief, this will be a part of that. You can look for that. Helplessness, which is closely correlated to anxiety, where a person's locus of control is challenged. And so the external part of that is they feel like they're at the mercy of the circumstance, and they have no ability to exert control or self-efficacy or control over that situation. Shock. People who would normally hear about death for the first time or get the news, they're shocked. It's almost like you driving down the street and you can see the car coming up behind you, and you brace yourself for the impact. And when you get through with the car accident, I mean, and the person probably didn't hit you that hard, but you didn't really respond to it. However, a day or two later, oh my goodness, you can't walk, you can't move, and that's kind of the way it is when grief is involved. I want to introduce a couple more words to you real quick. One of those is emancipation. Emancipation is a part of a grief we don't like to talk about, but that's when a person has a sense of, oh, I'm out of it. Oh God, this is a relief for me. The person I was married to was an albatross around my neck, heavy-handed, unbending dictator, and it's a sense of relief. And people feel that that's not an appropriate response that they're supposed to have. I don't know about your experience. I just want to introduce that word. We'll talk about it later. Another one is relief. When a person goes through a huge sense of long sickness or addiction, a history of addictions, and they die in that process. Sometimes it's a relief that they are gone and they're not suffering anymore. And sometimes people feel guilty about that they are feeling release. Or if a person who made several suicide attempts is successful, we almost feel like we are, there's something wrong because we have that feeling. Numbness. She mentioned numbness, feeling a lack of feeling, that there's no emotion, there's no highs, lows, there's no happiness, I'm just like I'm numb. I don't feel anything. It's just like, and that's numbness is like a defense mechanism. And what I mean by that, it really builds a dam to stop the flow of feelings. And what happens when the dam cracks and breaks? Lord, everything behind that dam floods, okay, and it provides a whole lot of devastation. And so if numbness is not dealt with, when it does release, okay, it can be a overwhelming sensation for everybody involved. Physical sensation, what are you talking about? When you're going through grief, there are some things that you may have identified with or you may be experiencing, like the hollowness of a stomach, tightness of your chest, tightness in the throat, oversensitivity to noise or light, or a sense of depersonalization. For instance, I may be walking down the street and nothing seems real, including myself or yourself. Blameless or breathlessness, feeling short of breath or weakness in the muscles, faint, lack of energy, dry mouth. All of those are symptomatic of what a person can be feeling when they're going through grief. Cognition, when we say cognition, in our field, we're talking about thinking, thoughts. The disbelief that it couldn't have happened. This is a mistake. What I just heard was not real. That is, it takes a minute for that to settle in and say it did happen. It is real. And most of the time that happens at the end of the service, or when you end the service, where there's a sense of finality to it. Confusion, difficulty concentrating, forgetting things, can order or your thoughts are out of order and there's no logic to flow of thoughts. That's a part of that. Preoccupation or obsessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts. You're watching TV and watching a movie, and all of a sudden you have this intrusive thought of the person that you lost. Or you're doing something fun and you're out having fun, all of a sudden you have this preoccupation, this person's not here, so why am I having fun? So the ruminative, consistent inflow of things, the sense of the person's presence. I've heard people say this. I felt them in my house. I felt them in my room. I felt them. I mean, I can sense them around me. People who go through grieving can also have hallucinations. Now, these are not things that we diagnose you with as having a disorder. These are just things that are characteristic of that. What do you mean? Visual and audio sensations or experiences of the person that you lost. Transient, illusionary stuff that happens. That you smell things that is characteristic of that person, that clone, or that somebody make a statement or do something that reminds you of that person. Lastly, I'm gonna wrap it up with this: behaviors. Sometime when you're going through grief, there's issues with sleep disturbances, okay? Unable to sleep or sleeping too much, eating disorders, distracted and absent-minded behavior, social withdrawal, dreams of the deceased person, avoiding reminders of that person, maybe searching and calling out for that person, calling them on the phone and forgetting that, sighing, restless hyperactivity, crying, visiting places, and carrying objects that remind you of that person, treasuring objects that belong to that person. All those are normal processes of grief. Now, I'm gonna tell you, oftentimes grief mirrors depression, and but I want you to know that depression, even though it comes with part of grief, can be addressed as well. So everything we're talking about right now can be addressed. Mental health or disorders or mental health issues can be managed. It can be addressed, and people can rebound or bounce back from their things that are distressing them, and they can go on and move forward in their lives. And so I want you to know, if you're at that place right now, don't mean that you're going to be there forever. I encourage you to get a part of social group or a grief support groups. Get into therapy. Talk to your mental health professional. Open up and speak in terms of place where you can have a safe place to bounce off your fears and bounce off the things that are bothering and distressing you. Listen, I'm wrapping the show up tonight. I've been a little long. We went over the hour that we're supposed to be. But tomorrow we're going to talk about the 5 stages of grief. I'm going to try to get some other professionals to come on. And if any professionals out there are listening to me, send me an email or send me a text at my information, the number I gave you, because you may have some insight that I'm not sharing. I encourage you to come and be a part of this forum, because my goal is just to provide a forum for people to get help. There's no pay involved. There's no recognition involved. We're just here to provide a community, to provide a place for people can achieve help, hope, and healing. Well, listen, until tomorrow, my mother used to say this to me all the time: Ricky, no matter what's going on, just go be the best you can be today. Until tomorrow, I'm signing off. But come join me tomorrow, 8 o'clock, as we continue this discussion about the stages of grief.